Night. So the national spin from Kathy Hochul's victory in New York's 26th congressional district is still going strong. House Speaker John Boehner admitted that Medicare indeed played a small role in the outcome, just a small one, he said. And Democrats continue to suggest that they might actually be able to win back the House on that very issue alone in 2012. Now, in Western New York, there's also fallout. Hochul's victory has bolstered Democrats' belief that they might be able to oust Erie County Executive Chris Collins this November. Before the special election in the 26th, Hochul's name was actually the strongest. She was the likeliest candidate for that seat. So you can imagine that my next guest was very happy on Tuesday night when she won. MarkPoloncarzINT is the Erie County Comptroller, and he is the Democratic candidate who is challenging Collins for county executive. He's joining us from Buffalo tonight. Thanks very much for your time, Comptroller.
It's my pleasure to be here again, Liz.
So the last time I saw you actually was on election night. We were at the Hochul headquarters. You were there along with pretty much every Democrat in Buffalo and Rochester, it felt like to me. You looked very happy that night, and you told me that you thought that this pretty much opened the door and created a theme for you. What did you mean by that?
Well, first off, I was very pleased for my partner in Erie County government, Kathy Hochul. She ran a fantastic campaign. And the voters rejected the Republican agenda in Washington, which was destruction of Medicare and destruction of the social safety net programs that people rely upon. And I think that sets up very well for my race this year as well, because Chris Collins, the Erie County executive, has proposed taking away eyeglasses and dentures and hearing aids for needy seniors. He's completely out of touch with the voters of Erie County, similar to what Jane Corwin was, and I'm very confident that as this year goes by, the people of Erie County are going to respond to my message just like they did Kathy Hochul's.
Okay, what you're talking about actually is Medicaid. That's what you're speaking of when you talk about eliminating eyeglasses, dentures, hearing aids. That's actually has to do with counties' ability to pay for certain quote-unquote fringes, if you will, in Medicaid. Is that right?
That's correct. Chris Collins has come out through editorials in statewide newspapers, and I believe even on your program in the past, saying that the county should be given the power to eliminate discretionary spending in Medicaid. Correct. Well, that sounds all well and good, and the average voter hears that and they think, well, that's wonderful, because they believe Medicaid to be something that it's more than. And if you really look at what discretionary spending in Medicaid, it is eyeglasses, hearing aids, dentures for seniors, eyeglasses for children. And when you go out and talk to the voters of the community, they say, no, we don't want to eliminate that. And it also neglects what is the largest issue with Medicaid, which is waste, fraud, and abuse. My office is doing an audit right now into Medicaid waste, fraud, and abuse, and the county executive didn't even want to assist me in that audit. Well, it took the control board that we still have in Erie County to basically bring him to the table to do that.
Sure.
And it boggled the mind why the county executive didn't want to do it in the first place.
This is what the county executive says, though, and this is, and one might argue that it's probably a pretty standard response, is that your audits are in fact politically motivated. I mean, look, the bottom line is he's a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're now running against him, and so he probably could use that argument. You've seen that pretty much time-honored argument when any comptroller runs against any executive. That's a standard thing to say. But let's talk for a second about Medicaid. I mean, would you not argue that Medicaid costs are out of control? It is the largest spending block in the state. It's that and education. If you don't get those costs under control, which we saw in the state budget this year, the state's in trouble.
I fully agree with you, and it's one of the reasons why my office is doing an audit. We're not looking at the county's provision of services. We're looking at the outside vendors who we believe are actually charging more than they should be to Erie County. Monroe County has entered into a program with the New York State Office of Medicaid Inspector General to go after this waste, fraud, and abuse in the program. And it's not on the county side, it's on the vendor side. Monroe County just received a $500,000 check from the head of OMIG for their participation in the recovery of over $2 million, the rest which went to the state and the federal government. We're not doing that in Erie County, and we should. Chris Collins wants to take away and strip eyeglasses from seniors on the Medicaid program. I want to go after pharmacists and other providers that are bilking the system. That's where we're going to save millions of dollars, not just a few thousands here and there.
Let's talk for a second, though, about the differences in this race versus Kathy Hochul's race. I mean, part of the problem here is that you are trying to oust an incumbent. That is a very difficult and uphill task, first of all. And well, hold on. And second of all, he's got the Conservative Party endorsement, and at this point, it's looking like, you know, he's coming in pretty strong.
Well, I would beg to disagree with that. He had let's put it this way, in 2007 he ran against an individual who had 4 lines, including the Conservative Party endorsement, and Chris Collins won that race handily. The people in the end vote for the candidate. They don't necessarily vote based on the lines, and if anything, Kathy Hochul proved that in the 26th Congressional District, because if it was based on the lines, Jane Corwin should have easily won this because she had the Republican and Conservative lines. I feel confident that as this year goes along, people are going to be responding to my message just like they did Kathy's. And this race is a lot closer than people think. This race is pretty much a dead heat at this point. Chris Collins might be just one of the least favored individuals in all of Erie County. He cut, at the same time he raised taxes, he cut services like librarians and rodent control officers and sheriff's deputies, correctional officers, but he found money to give raises to his highest paid employees.
Yeah.
And the people of Erie County at the time said, this is ridiculous. If you're asking us to give more, you better have an austerity budget, and how can you claim you have an austerity budget when you're giving raises to your high-level patronage appointees?
Well, we should
Chris
say,
is more of the same.
We should say this. First of all, we have invited the county executive to come on, and we're still waiting for him to agree, and there's an invitation extended. So we are going to be speaking to him. But he has defended those raises, saying that he thought that they were appropriate. I mean, the problem here, of course, is, first of all, your election is going to be in a general election, right? And it is a number of months from now. So do you really believe that this actually wasn't a freak occurrence, which is what the Republicans are saying? There was a quote-unquote spoiler in Jack Davis. You may or may not believe that's what he did, but there was a third-party candidate. There isn't one in your race.
Well, in the third-party candidate for the 26th Congressional District, at one point Jack Davis was almost at 25% of the vote.
Right.
One Siena College poll had him at 23, and then he was down to 9. And that vote pretty much broke evenly. And if anything, I think Kathy Hochul got more of that support than Jane Corwin did. So in the end, I don't think the third-party candidate, Jack Davis, had that much of an impact. A lot of those voters that went for Jack anyway probably wouldn't have voted for either candidate. I walked the district on the Saturday and Sunday before, and truthfully I had a number of people tell me I'm supporting Kathy. I only ran into a couple people that said they were supporting Jane. I did run into a few people that said they were supporting Jack, but because they didn't like either candidate, which leads me to believe that they probably wouldn't have voted it if Jack wasn't in the race. So I'm not really worried about there being no third-party candidate. As you say, this is a race that involves an incumbent, and whenever you have a race about with an incumbent, invariably the race is about that incumbent. And right now, Chris Collins is not very well liked. He's not even liked in some ways, you can say, in his own party, because he's fighting off the after effects of what happened because of the extremely poor race that was run by the Corwin campaign, which just happens to be Chris Collins' own folks.
Sure. I mean, and
so it's going to be an interesting year.
That's a little bit inside baseball, right? I mean, you and I are quite interested in that, and I think there are a lot of political pundits who are looking at that and shaking their heads. All the way down to Washington, there are people in the Republican Party sort of quietly questioning Erie County Chairman, the GOP Chairman Nick Langworthy, Chris Collins' own chief of staff, Chris Grant, who took a leave and was loaned actually to the Corwin campaign. He was her campaign manager. So there are a lot of questions, surely, but voters probably aren't going to turn on that. You keep mentioning that you think that this race is very close and that Chris Collins is in fact not very well liked. And I got to ask you, what are you basing that on? Do you have a poll?
Well, we've got plenty of data that shows that this race is very close, that the people of Erie County are responding to my message. Hundreds came out to my announcement earlier this year, and I feel very confident when all is said and done, the people of Erie County are going to elect me their next Erie County executive on November 8th, and I'm going to take office on January 1st. Just
before I let you go, I want to ask you one quick question. Do you know at all who is going to be vying for that clerk's position that Kathy Hochul left empty? And that is, of course, an appointment that the Governor Andrew Cuomo, will be making, and I'm sure that it's going to be pretty sought after. That's a pretty good patronage plum right there. Do you have any feeling about it?
Well, I've heard a few names that have popped up. I've heard Dennis Gaberzak, the Assemblyman, legislator Lynn Marinelli, former legislator Diane Terranova, current legislator Maria White, Bernie Tolbert, who is a former FBI individual, as well as being the director of security of the NBA. There's going to be some issues that need to be resolved in the next week or two in the Democratic Party regarding clerk. I feel confident we're going to have a very strong ticket for November.
Fascinating, because that person will, of course, have to run along with you in on that general election ballot. I want to thank you very much, Comptroller Poloncarz. It's great to see you, and we will see you soon when we're back in Western New York.
It's my pleasure, Liz.